I'm watching that woman over there in that yellow car. She's driving around the department store already for the third time trying to find a parking lot. We must discontinue this unusable pattern of mixing automobiles and people.
I can remember when the Gruen plan first came out, 1956 maybe. At any rate, I was 10 or 12 years old, and it filled the entire front page of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, the announcement of this daring futuristic plan for a downtown of a city.
We are going to have a belt highway.
At the essence of the plan, the downtown was divided into a series of districts, each of them served by a large parking garage where you could drive your car in from the suburbs. And remember the setting, America was fleeing to the suburbs, so you could drive back downtown and park in one of these garages and then enter a pedestrian precinct where the vehicles were excluded. The renderings and planning was full of these futuristic ideas like moving sidewalks and overhead pedestrian bridges, the sort of thing that we see today in international airports, and I think people are a little less enthralled with.
We have to create something.
This had all been commissioned and overseen by a blue ribbon panel, but there'd been virtually no broad-based public input. And I don't think it was ever realistically conceived in terms of how you might finance such a plan.
Each of the people who's done planning in Fort Worth reflect the prevailing attitudes of the time they were practicing. And I think that what's important about cities is their individual and unique character. I think as soon as you bring universal solutions to a city, which Gruen did in Fort Worth, they fail.
It is a unique opportunity in the architecture world to have this sort of impact and this sort of freedom.
And when we showed up on the scene in the early 80s, one of our master planning diagrams just showed, what was vacant ground or surface parking lots versus built out stuff. And, it was sort of a city with a formerly great smile, now with a lot of missing teeth.
We had a vast array of probably 20 years of buildings that were not sympathetic to the urban environment.
Several people built a lot of skyscrapers which need parking, which wouldn't fit on a single block, so you had parking garages. That created, another intrusion to a good pedestrian-friendly environment.
When we started working in Fort Worth, you could not find anybody on the street after 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, there was literally no one here.
Rather than drawing grand schemes like had been done earlier, the goals were modest. Let's start by, what can we do now that will have an immediate impact? How do you make one good block?
One of the most important issues in Fort Worth is the streetscape. You need to be able to have a pleasant environment walking on the street. It's one of the hallmarks of any city.
We took the direction to make the downtown a destination for leisure time. Dining, entertainment, music. Finally, when we opened a first set of multi-screen movie theaters downtown, things began to explode.
I think what is so unique about Fort Worth is that you do have a consensus amongst leadership and government. And I think that's the hardest thing to generate. When you look at the civic leadership and you look at the private leadership, they pretty much agree as to what Fort Worth's future should be.
Sundance West is the first rental housing to have been built in Fort Worth since World War II. First downtown housing. Every market study said we were out of our mind, and I said to Ed, well, I'll tell you what, let's put up a sign, leasing sign. Let's say downtown residential housing for rent. If you're interested, call. And we figured that how many people called would tell us whether people were interested. We got something like 450 calls for 100 units.
These are not pieces that are intended to impress architects. These are buildings that are intended to attract people and make them really happy to use them. They find them fun. They find them inspiring. They find them of a human scale. And they find that they work. They function. The program fits into them. And this is really the central paradigm by which we build in downtown Fort Worth.
Now the major complaint on a weekend night, you can't find a parking space. And so while people find that to be a negative, we think it is the greatest sign of success possible.